We're back with part 2 of our series exploring what it takes to brew the best possible Czech lager at home in partnership with the wonderful team from Budvar. In this video, Martin meets with Adam Brož, the 10th Brewmaster here at Budvar. Martin and Adam talk through the details that go into creating this iconic beer, as well as getting tips from Adam on how we might be able to try and brew this when we get back to the UK.
So I'm honoured to be sat here with Adam, who is the brewmaster here at Budvar. Thank you, Adam, for taking the time out to talk to us. You are the 10th brewmaster here at Budvar. Can you tell me just a little bit about what makes Budvar special and different?
Yeah, it's quite a tricky question because I must say in the first line that the special, they are the people and the attitude. Because this brewery has been working since 1895 and we are still protecting the original recipe of the Budweiser lager. So people and attitude are vital to reach the excellent beer. Next to it, definitely, to fulfill the recipe, we need to keep the traditional process of brewing, fermentation and maturation, and with a special part of ingredients, because they are really unique, made in Czech Republic, starting with water from artesian wells, then the malt from barley produced in Moravia, and finally the fine aromazacer hops in the form of pressed cones.
Can we just talk a little bit about the start of that? So the water, that's special here in terms of what water are you changing the water or treating the water? Or?
It's really a big fortune that the brewery was set up right in the Budvar city, because we have our own water since the beginning of the brewery from artesian wells, which are able to give the water at very high quality, the best water for the lager production. We are not needed to treat the water in any way. It is very soft water, only can take the water from the well, filter it through so-called sand filters to remove the solid particles from the well, and directly to use it for brewing. So the easiest and the best way.
So you don't have to do any modification to it, but you do check it on a regular basis to ensure it's consistently at where it should be?
Yes, there are no chemicals needed to treat it. We check it in our laboratory each week, and we are sure that the water is the best water for the lager.
But then kind of like the brewing process itself, you're using 2 double kits and you're doing a decoction. Can you just explain a bit more about this? Why you're sticking with decoction mashing? Yeah,
it's very important because you fit one of the pillars of the Budvar original taste, because at the moment of double decoction, the real taste profile of the final beer creates. So we use the double decoction from the Moravian malt, and it is important to obtain the right ratio of longer or shorter molecules of sugars to formate the final taste. You tune up the final attenuation and the taste profile.
So we saw that there's 2 kettles and the malt's been added with the water at the same time, and actually it seemed to be much looser thickness in terms of like the mash itself than I expected. Is that having an impact on it as well?
Yeah, definitely. There are important the ratios of water and the grist, the milled malt, because you can tune the activity of the enzymes by the thickness of the mash. So we really use the original recipe when the special amount of water is mixed with grist at 37 degrees centigrade. Then we add proper amount of hot water to increase the temperature up to 50, and then the first mash is heated at the most important temperatures, 65 and 75 degrees centigrade. I don't tell you any secrets, because if you open the old books of Czech brewing and you find up the double decoction, that's really the same process. That's optimized by centuries, that in this case it is able to tune the final taste of the beer.
So you've got the one kettle that's doing the steps and raising it up and then boiling the grist, and then that's added back into your main kettle.
Yeah.
So what steps?
37
37
is the
start
first,
point.
then 50.
50. And is that for a certain amount of time?
Then you take the first mash into the machine kettle.
Yeah.
It is heated up to 65, then approximately 20 minutes duration, and 75 is the second very important temperature. If you keep this temperature and if you keep this mashing diagram, you obtain the constant taste profile of the beer.
Are you actually boiling any of the mash as well?
Each of the mashes are boiled after
achieving the little step.
Yeah, because after duration at 75, the first mash is heated up to boil, 20 minutes boiled, and returned back to the rest of the brew. And the process is repeated again.
And that's how you're achieving this kind of beautiful bready taste to the beer with what is just a very simple grain.
Yes, because the equilibrium of longer and shorter molecules, simply said, in the mash could adjust the final attenuation. They are the small, the fermentable sugars, and at the same time, some longer molecules are remaining in the mash and in the beer to make the breadiness.
Obviously, that is something that's very unique in terms of yourselves kind of doing that here and still doing that, because there are obviously easier ways to brew. So that malt, we touched on, that is a Czech grown malt. That also then kind of leads into the hops that you're using. We
are speaking again about a unique ingredient because it's only one variety, the fine aromazácer hops, in the Czech language žatec.
Yeah.
It's a small historic city near to Prague, and there is a very small growing area with the finest aroma hops worldwide.
So, and this is again a historic grower that you've kind of always worked with, and they grow just for you.
What's typical for these hops, that's the aroma and very mild bitterness. So if you judge the Budvar beer, it's at the middle in the intensity of its bitterness, but very mild.
Adam, you talked about the hops and where they come from. At what points are you adding them into the kettle?
We are using in 100% the pressed cones, and it means that the first dose to the kettle it is when the bottom is covered by the sweet wort. So that's the first dose. This dose serves mainly for the bitterness, for the bitter units, because if you use the cones, you need a lot of time to convert the alpha bitter acids into iso-alpha bitter acids. Then the second dose comes when there is full kettle. It means at the beginning of the wort boiling. And the last one, it's half an hour before the end of 90 minutes hops boiling. Perhaps it could seem to be too early, but if you use the pressed cones again, there is a time to distribute them to the whole volume of the kettle. So that's the reason why half an hour before the end. Definitely the last dose is most important for the hops aroma.
So then after the boil's completed, which is a 90-minute boil, it then goes to fermentation. Can you talk us through a little bit about?
There are another very important pillars of the lager, because if you have the finished wort, you must remember, if you use the cones, you have to remove the used cones from the wort. It's not so trivial task for many breweries, because I think that we are the only brewery which is equipped with such an equipment which is able to remove the cones. And after that, the wort is cooled down to 7 degrees centigrade. The yeast is added, approximately from 15 to 20 million cells per milliliter by the dosing pump. And the main fermentation starts. It means it starts at 7 degrees centigrade, doesn't exceed 11 degrees centigrade. It's very important for the volatile compounds, and takes, it's very easy when it is lager. It has 12 degrees of plateau, so 12 days of main fermentation.
But it's really interesting. You're starting at 7 degrees. You're not you're making sure that the yeast is the right amount, it's heavily dosed into the worts.
They are used to it because we use our own culture. It's one strain since the beginning of the brewery. And I think the easy advice for home brewers, no defilometer, no pump is needed. We could open the old books again, half a liter of thick yeast in 1 hectoliter of wort. It could be the pitching rate.
Yeah. And then you're not raising it afterwards to clear any diacetyl off, no?
No. With diacetyl we don't have cope with, because if you ferment it slowly but long time, it means main fermentation 12 days, and after that 3 months of maturation, in case of our lager, you have no worry with diacetyl.
So you're not rushing to get it out, you're making sure that it's done the traditional way and the long way and the tastiest way.
Yes, it's not only about the diacetyl, it's about the complex taste of the beer.
Adam, thank you so much for talking through kind of your brewing process here. Now, when we go back and we have a go at our next attempts of trying to brew a Czech lager at home, we're not going to be brewing 1.8 million hectolitres like yourself. Can you give me, say, like 5 tips or bits of advice that I should consider when brewing a 20 to 23 litre batch?
Yeah, definitely we can do it. At first, the ingredients. If you want to be authentic, you have to bring the proper ingredients: malt, hops and water. Then I think you can't skip the two-mash decoction. It will be much more difficult in your scale than in the mine, because the mass behaves a bit differently. In the large scale, it's easier to keep the precise temperatures, for example, so you will have to give much effort to do it, but I think it's worth doing it. Try it, definitely. Then the fermentation, in the part of the main fermentation, don't exceed 11 degrees. Try to ferment it at lower temperatures. And then what is vital again, that's the long maturation. It's vital for the smooth lager without any falls. If you use only pale malt and the hops with fine aroma, you have no chance to mask any off tastes. So the patience, that's the next ingredients. But it has one condition together: your equipment, your brewery must be absolutely clean, because then you can afford the long maturation without any microbiological risks. And what is more, it's not in the brewery directly, but it's near to the table. Give much effort to serving the beer properly.
That's really interesting. You've really given me some fantastic tips there to think about and take away. But that last one as well, that I wouldn't really have normally considered that as in part of the brewing process of the way the beer is presented and served. Adam, I really cannot explain how grateful I am for you giving us some of your time, for just sharing the information you've shared. I, sitting here, can feel your passion and kind of dedication to brewing technique, and I think I'll definitely taste it every time I have a beer, and I'm going to taste it probably even more when I drink more Budvar later on. So thank you so much, really appreciate it. And I'll try and send you a bottle if I get it anywhere near as good enough for, I think, for you to maybe taste it if we get close to it.
Thank you a lot, it was a pleasure for me.
Now, armed with our tips from Adam, you might be thinking that we're heading straight back to the UK to get brewing. Well, not just yet. In part 3, we're going to dive even further into Czech beer culture and learn all about how to serve these style of beers in the traditional way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel and you've got notifications turned on